Hey, it's David. Let's move on with the Bobber saddle build and let's see if we can actually get it finished this time. Last time we got to here, so that the actual saddle frame itself is mounted to the saddle, but we need to connect up the front bars here because that's what this will swivel on when the spring compresses. At the moment it's just flopping around in midair, which won't do at all, so I need to connect to here, which means fabricating up some bars to do the job. So let's do that. That's roughly ground down, so they're ready to weld on. Let's see how this works. So I've welded these up. There's a bit of cleanup needed here so that the actual bolt will sit down tightly. Not the prettiest of welds, but they were cut deep, and so they're quite strong for all their ugliness. This was the I think this. I was gonna try and claim it was the first one I did, but I'm not sure it was. On this side, I've ground it flat, or almost flat, so it's a bit in work in progress. And I've just started doing the same on this one, so that that can rotate on the plate. There'll be a washer in there, but it'll be rotating on there. I will probably need to do some bending on these to actually get them square, and there's a lot of shaping and such will need to be done before they're finalised. So the hinge is now fabricated. Not the smoothest working at the moment, but it's roughly fabricated. Now I need to connect these ends to the rest of the saddle. So hinge is just quickly mounted. Those are slightly over long, so I'm just going to cut these down a bit. Then I'm going to put a bit of a flat just on the back there. Partly because I want to thin this down, because what I'm going to be welding to is much thinner. So I'm going to take some thickness off of this, and so to just grind that back a bit where it's going to weld onto the outside of this, and then see if we can actually get that to weld together. And if that's the case, then this part will be fully mocked up. Still needs dressing, preparation, blah blah blah, but that can come later. Right, so just a little tack on each. Don't want to do more because I've already made some holes in this felt underlining from welding this up when I bodged this. So little tack there, hopefully it'll hold it. Now what I can do is strip all this off the saddle and put it away somewhere safe. Welding wire. And weld up that joint properly and cut off the excess here and make a better job of it. So they're now welded on. The welds need more work in finishing and touch-up welding and so forth, as does all of it. I don't know how much work I'll do on this. It's not really something that's terribly visible, or it might be really visible, I don't know. But certainly at the moment I'm just after functional, but I imagine I will do a bit more dressing. So I might, here for example, I might re-weld down here, and then so I can grind smooth so it all flows smoothly, whereas at the moment I've just sort of got ground down welds. So that's not really focused, is it? And such. So this is a little bit ugly around here. So yeah, maybe a bit more welding, a bit more grinding. But that's stage 2. That's prettifying. That's getting ready for paint and finishing. So let's see how this mounts onto the saddle, and see if we now actually have a fully mounted saddle ready to be mounted somewhere. Okay, I'll spare you the me struggling with hardware. So I've mounted that in there, so that's now ready to work, but we've got a bit of a gap here, so we need a bit of heating and bending to bring these into touching. Before it was brought in when you clamped in that, but clearly with the heat of the welding these have moved outwards. So let's have a bit of heat, just a bit of more bending, and see where we go. Right, saddle is done, or mocked up anyway, so it doesn't look too bad. I do like the bar that runs across here. I did that deliberately rather than use flat plate. Originally I'd planned on using some plate which is of similar dimensions to the bar that's actually here, and I thought I could do that because it would give me some ability to move the seat backwards and forwards. But I decided the bar actually looks better because it's going to be visible sitting under there. There's some hardware changes need to be done. As I say, there's a lot of finishing work required, but as it stands, it's functional, it's fully welded. So, you know, needs some re-welding, cleaning, blah blah blah. Not the issue at this point in time. So that's now fully mocked up. So now I need to find a way of attaching this to the bike. I don't honestly know how much seat post is going to be visible. It's going to be possibly quite ironic that they'll actually probably end up to be almost none at all visible. But if it is, that's how it is. Lessons have been learnt. I've had fun. And I've got some ideas what I would do next time. So this is all good. So let's see if we can find out a way of mounting it. So what's the easiest way to mount a bicycle seat post onto a motorbike? Well, start with a bicycle, I think. So I'm going to chop, 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 and see if I can use this to mount onto there. Could be interesting. So I trimmed it down to get this, because what I planned on doing was chopping this part off here and cutting into here and welding this to a plate that bolts to the back plate. But looking at it, it would be better if I actually welded, if I put a plate in the front as well as the back, and that way it would be supported back and front, and it wouldn't be reliant on this joint here sort of cantilevering my whole body weight off those back two mountings. Except that I realised if I was going to do that, it works better this way round. And I've just cut this piece of tube off, which means I've now got to grind it down. I've got to cut this piece out, grind it down, and then cut this clamp off, insert a new piece of tube to stick up this side and clamp it down. The joys of fabrication. So I'm going to do that because this has now given me an idea of what I want to do. I've got to trim off these and trim it up generally a little bit and see if it'll work the way I think it will. Right, so after quite a lot of cutting and grinding, I've managed to cut the welds out of that piece of tube and remove it from the pipe, which I've now also spent a bit of time bending or squashing the ends in the vise of both ends and bending around a little bit to try and create something that'll fit. So the idea is that I can put this in here either all the way through and weld it in, or maybe just part way through and weld it in, so I've got a variety of angles. So that's probably a better way of looking at it. But I'm out of time, so this will have to be done on the next time, and I'm going to do some serious thinking over the coming week and decide whether or not this piece of tube is the best answer. I have a little bit of concern about clearance on the underside, because underneath this will be sitting the spring, and whilst most of the motion is backwards and forwards, I do suspect there's a little bit of lifting up on the back end of that spring which could clip into the bottom of this. So I need to think about whether or not this is actually the best answer. I had originally envisaged being that way up, so there was loads of clearance, and this would be, so as I say, sort of counter braced in here with supports and stuff, but not going that way. So I need to give some thought about exactly whether I use this piece of tube or a different piece of tube or something like that. I do want to use tube because, as back to discussion on the front mount of the original seat mounting, I want it to be tube. Anyway, so lots for me to think about, and thanks very much for joining me today and in my work on the Bobber seat, and I will see you guys again soon.